Welcome to a new episode from Perfect English Podcast. Today is going to be about listener's choice. And every week we're going to have an episode dedicated to you, to your questions, and I'm going to try my best to answer some of the questions I receive in a manner that is beneficial for everybody who's listening to this podcast. There is a link in the description of this episode that takes you to the Perfect English Podcast page on my website, and there you can find a place where you can post your questions. You can send any questions you like, and I'm going to address your questions as soon as I can. We're going to answer 4 questions today. The first question came from Hannah. She was asking about the difference between the word fun and funny. Well, actually, this is a very good question because a lot of the time you hear the word fun and you hear the word funny, but you don't know exactly where you could use each or if there is actually a difference between them. Sometimes people use them interchangeably. That means they use them both in kind of the same place, but do they actually mean the same thing? Let's find out. Now, fun actually is not exactly like funny. There is a difference. If something is fun, it is pleasant, enjoyable, and not serious. For example, we say it's fun working for him. It's fun, it's pleasant, it's enjoyable. It's not that serious. And if you have fun, if we say that I have fun, that means I enjoy myself. For example, she wanted a bit more fun out of life, and that is she wanted to enjoy herself a little bit more. Now, remember that fun is an uncount noun or uncountable noun. You do not say that someone has funs or has a great fun. It is an uncountable noun, so you don't use a with it and you don't use it in plural. So that was about fun. But about funny, funny is different. You say that something is funny when it is strange, surprising, or puzzling. For example, the funny thing, we went to Arthur's house just yesterday. Well, the funny thing, kind of like we're saying here, the strange thing. Or we can say, I always thought of him as very ordinary. That's funny. So did I. That's strange. That's surprising. This is what I'm trying to say here. Or we can say, have you noticed anything funny about this plane? Have you noticed anything strange or puzzling about this plane? So this is where we use funny. Funny in this context has the meaning of strange, surprising, or puzzling, different from fun only, which means pleasant, enjoyable, and not serious. And funny can also be used in a different context. You can also say that something is funny when it is amusing and makes you smile or laugh. For example, he told funny stories. Now, funny stories here, we're not talking about strange stories or surprising. Here, in the context, we mean amusing stories that make you smile or laugh. So I hope I answered your question, Hannah, and thank you very much for this question. Now I'll move to the next question, and that question came from Marcus. He was asking about the difference between holiday and vacation. And I chose this one because this actually causes a problem with some people, although it shouldn't. But anyway, some people find it difficult sometimes. What should I say? Is it a vacation? Is it a holiday? Now let's start with holiday first. In British English, you refer to a period of time which you are allowed to spend away from work or school as the holiday or the holidays. For example, we can say the school had undergone repairs during the holiday. During this time, you are allowed to spend away from work or school. Or we can say, one day after the Christmas holidays, I rang her up. Now, you can refer to a period of time spent away from home enjoying yourself as a holiday. For example, we can say, he thought that Jane needed a holiday. Or I went to Marrakesh for a holiday. So that was holiday. When you spend a long period of time like this each year, you refer to it as your holidays. For example, where are you going for your holidays? Now, if you are on holiday, you are spending a period of time away from work or school, or you are spending some time away from home enjoying yourself. For example, we can say, remember to turn off the gas when you go on holiday. All of what I said about holiday applies perfectly to British English. In American English, it's a little bit different. In American English, a holiday is a single day when people do not work, often to commemorate an important event. For example, we can say the Independence Day is a holiday, a special day of the year they celebrate, and everybody is off work. They call it a holiday in the United States. And that brings us to the word vacation. Now, the usual American word for a longer period of time spent away from work or school, or for a period of time spent away from home enjoying yourself, is vacation, not holiday or holidays. For example, Harold used to take a vacation at that time. Now, at a British university or college, the vacation is one of the periods of several weeks when the university or college is officially closed for teaching. For example, I have a lot of reading to do over the vacation, and that is specifically British English. So remember, in British English, it's different. In British English, the holiday is used for those special days when you commemorate something, for the time you take off and you want to enjoy yourself, especially away from home, that you call it holiday, or holidays for longer periods of time. In American English, a holiday is just the single day when people do not work, often to commemorate something. So it is different. The longer period of time you take away from home, that's called a vacation. I hope I've answered your question, Marcus, and thank you very much for this question. And now let's move to the third question that came from Paulo. And Paulo was asking about the difference between the words exterior and external. Both of them mean something outside or something out, because these two words are the opposite of interior and internal. But what is the actual difference between exterior and external? Let's find out. Now, the exterior of a building or vehicle is the outside part of it. For example, the church is famous for its exterior. Or you're supposed to keep your car exterior in good condition. So exterior is often used as an adjective in front of a noun to refer to an outside part of a building or vehicle. For example, the aerial can be fixed to an exterior wall. Now, the exterior wall, we're talking about the outside part of the building, or the exterior body work. Again, the outside part of a vehicle. External is close to the meaning of exterior, that it can be used in front of a noun to refer to an outside part of a building, like we can say external walls and external doorways. But here comes the difference with external. External can be used in front of other nouns to refer to things which happen, come from, or exist outside a place or area of an activity. For example, death rates drop because of external factors, because of factors that come from or exist outside this place of activity. Or, for example, we say they did it in response to external pressures, to pressures coming from outside, not from pressures that are coming from the inside. Now, it depends if we're talking about a company, so these pressures are coming from outside the company, external pressures. We're not talking about pressure that is coming from the inside of the company. So in these cases, when we want to talk about this meaning, things that are coming from outside an area of activity, we cannot use exterior. Remember that. You can use exterior and external to talk about exterior walls or external walls. It's not a problem in this case. But when we want to talk about external pressures and external factors, we cannot say exterior factors and exterior pressures. This is different. So again, thank you, Paulo, for this question. And now we come to the last question of today's episode, and that came from Aisha. And the question is about inversion. Well, this question relates to grammar. And to be honest, it is a big question and something that we can talk about for over an hour. But I'm going to try and keep this very simple and talk about only the most important places where we use inversion. But first, for the ones who do not know what inversion means, let me explain to you what that means. Inversion is the changing of the normal word order in a sentence by putting part or all of the verb group in front of the subject. Now, usually an auxiliary is put in front of the subject and the rest of the verb group is put after the subject. If no other auxiliary is used, a form of do is used unless the verb is be. Maybe that didn't explain inversion a lot, but Trust me, now we will get a lot of examples that will explain the idea of inversion more. Now, the simplest idea of inversion is when we make questions. Now, when we say something, when I say, he is a good person, he is, I use subject verb. This is the normal or the regular pattern we use to create sentences in English. If I change this, if I say, is he instead of he is he a good man? We know that this has become a question. So the first and most common use of inversion in English is to make questions. And usually the verb that we use at first or before the subject is an auxiliary verb. If we don't have an auxiliary verb, we usually use do, or if we have verb to be, it's enough. Like the example I just gave you. Is he a good man? It's verb to be. It's enough. But that's not all about it. So let's talk about the most common cases where we use inversion in English. Now, the first most common case and the normal case where we use inversion is in questions. Like when we say, are you ready? Are you? The verb came before the pronoun in this case. Or we can say, can John swim? Can. It's the modal auxiliary verb that came first and then John. It's not the opposite. It's not a regular statement when we say John can swim. It's can John swim? I'm making a question here. Now notice that you do not need to use inversion when you're expecting someone to confirm what you're saying, or when you want to express a reaction such as surprise, interest, doubt, or anger about what has just been said. Even that, we still use a question mark and we still make the tone of a question. For example, you've been having trouble? Actually, I didn't say, have you been having trouble? I didn't use inversion. I said, you've been having trouble, but I still sound like asking a question, and I still put a question mark at the end of this statement that I just used. Because here it's different. I'm not asking a genuine question where I have no idea what the answer might be, and I'm waiting for the answer. Not exactly. I'm using this because it's like saying, I know you've been having trouble. I know that, but I just want you to confirm it. Or maybe I'm just showing my surprise. You've been having trouble? I don't believe it. It's impossible. Something like that. So if this is your intention when asking a question, you can skip inversion, keep the sentence as it is, make the tone of a question, and put a question mark. It is still a question, but without inversion. We can do this when we have yes-no questions without WH words.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Looking to enhance your English skills while exploring a world of knowledge? Then English Plus Podcast website is just for you. Dive into diverse topics ranging from science to literature, history to business, and myths to modern insights. Each episode from our podcast or article from our magazine is a journey of learning and discovery, designed to not only improve your language skills, but also broaden your understanding of the world. Join us at English Plus Podcast, where language meets limitless learning. Tune in today and take your English to the next level. Visit EnglishPlusPodcast.com to start your journey. English Plus Podcast, language, learning, enlightenment. Never stop learning with English Plus.
When you have WH words, you must use inversion in a question. Unless the WH word is the subject itself. And inversion is not used in reported questions. For example, we don't say, she asked what was I doing. We say, she asked what I was doing. But that belongs to another area, and that is reporting or indirect questions that we can talk about in other episodes. Our focus today is about inversion. And we talked about the first and most important use of inversion in questions. But that's not all. And to be honest, that was not exactly Aisha's question. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction to understand what inversion is. And now we can get to her question. What she was asking about was not how we invert in questions. I'm pretty sure that she knows and you know that we change the normal order of the words in a sentence when we ask a question. what she was asking about, what is important for us to know today about the places where we use inversion and we don't have a question. So let's talk about these examples. We will start with adverbials. We use inversion after place adverbials. Now, inversion occurs in descriptions of a place or a scene when an adverbial of place is put at the beginning of a clause. Now, this type of structure is found mainly in writing. We don't usually use it in speaking, but in writing it's very common. For example, on the ceiling hung dustpans and brushes. Or beyond them lay the fields. Or we can say behind the desk was a middle-aged woman. Now, the regular thing to say is a middle-aged woman was behind the desk. That is the regular sentence. And that is what we usually say, especially when we speak. When we speak, we never say behind the desk was a middle-aged woman unless we want to sound a little bit poetic and mysterious, etc. But if it's just regular everyday conversation, we usually say a middle-aged woman was behind the desk. And that's it. But in writing, we can put the place adverbial at the beginning of the sentence. And if we do that, we have to use inversion. So you see, we say behind the desk, and that is the place adverbial. Instead of saying a middle-aged woman was, we say was a middle-aged woman, and it is not a question. So that is one very common use of inversion. And note, in this kind of inversion, the main verb is put in front of the subject. We say, for example, beyond them lay the fields. I did not use auxiliaries. I put the main verb as it is. Now, inversion is also used in speech, and it is a very common use. I'm pretty sure everybody uses them without knowing there is inversion in the first place. And that is after here and there. We say, for example, here's the money. Go and buy yourself a watch. Or we can say, here's my card. Or here comes the cloud of smoke. Or there's another one. There is another one. So here, when we say here is the money, the sentence should be the money is, not is the money, unless it's a question. Because we use here, we can make this inversion. We can say here is the money, not here the money is. Now, maybe that is more obvious in the sentence that I just said, here comes the cloud of smoke. Now, we should usually say the cloud of smoke comes, not comes the cloud of smoke. But because we use here at the beginning, we can say that. And of course, when we say there is and there are, there's another one. Now, we should say another one is, not is another one. It's not a question. But with there and here, we can use inversion as well. But pay attention. We have an exception here. You do not use inversion, in this case with here and there, if the subject is a personal pronoun. For example, we do not say here comes he. We can say here he comes. We do not say there is she. We say there she is. So because we have she and he, and these are personal pronouns, we do not use inversion. Remember that. So that was about place adverbials. And now for another very common case, we use it after negative adverbials. Inversion occurs when broad negative adverbs or other negative adverbials are put at the beginning of a clause for emphasis. Now, this structure is used in formal speech and writing. Again, inversion is not very common in everyday language or in speaking. It is used a lot in writing, though. And it sounds a little bit literary, so that's why people don't use it in everyday language. But anyway, it is used, and we can use it in writing if we want. So remember, we use it after negative adverbials. For example, never have I experienced such agony. Or, seldom have enterprise and personal responsibility been more needed. Or, rarely has so much time been wasted by so many people. Or we can say, the police said the man was extremely dangerous and that on no account should he be approached. So you see, we used here, never have I experienced, not I have experienced. Never have I experienced, because we use this negative adverbial at the beginning, never. Or when we say seldom have enterprise and personal responsibility been more needed. We did not say enterprise and personal responsibility have been needed, as we usually do. We invert because we use seldom at the beginning. After rarely, instead of saying rarely so much time has been wasted, we said rarely has so much time been wasted. And that's not all about it. Note that inversion also occurs in formal speech and writing after adverbials preceded by only. When we say, for example, only then, now the adverbial is then, but because we start with only, we said only then, it changes. We should use inversion after it. Let me continue the example. Only then would I ponder the contradictions inherent in my own personality. Instead of saying only then I would ponder, I said here only then would I ponder. But remember again, that is formal, used more in writing. You can also use inversion after neither and nor when you are saying that the previous negative statement always applies to another person or group. For example, one person says, I can't remember, and the other person answers, neither can I. Or for example, we can say, research assistants don't know how to do it, and nor do qualified tutors. So you see, after neither, we did not say neither I can, neither can I. And here, after nor, we did not say nor qualified tutors do, nor do qualified tutors. We can use inversion after so, when you are saying that the previous positive statement also applies to another person or group. For example, one person says, I've been through the Ford works at Dagenham. The other person can say, so have I. Or a person says, skating's just a matter of practice. Another person answers, yes, well, so is skiing. So you see, here we say, so is skiing, not so skiing is. In the first one, we said, so have I, not so I have. So there is inversion here. But note, when so is used to express surprise or to emphasize that someone should do something, inversion does not occur. For example, one person says, it's on the table behind you. The other person wants to show surprise, say, so it is. Or, I feel very guilty about it, so you should. So here it's not actually like the first one where we just agree with the other person's statement. It is used here to show surprise or to emphasize that someone should do something. And inversion also occurs in conditional clauses that are not introduced by a conjunction. This structure is actually formal. For example, had the two tied, victory would have gone to Mark. Now here, had the two tied is simply a conditional statement, but it doesn't have a conjunction. It should be if the two had tied. If. There is an if here. If we say if the two had tied, victory would have gone to Mark. And that would be normal, no inversion. But because we omitted if, and we can, technically in formal situations only, we can do that, but we have to invert. We have to use the inversion. Had the two tied instead of the two had tied. Now, inversion can also occur in comparison after as. For example, their father also made jewelry, as did their grandfather. So we did not say their grandfather did, as did their grandfather. There is also inversion in here. So you see, we have a lot of ways to use inversion, but these are the most common ways. After place adverbials, after negative adverbials, after neither and nor, after so, in conditionals that do not have a conjunction, or in comparisons after as. Now, again, thank you very much for this question, Aisha. That was a very good, very deep, and very big question, to be honest. But I tried to answer your question as briefly as possible, but I tried to include the most common situations where we use inversion. So I would like to thank you very much for listening to this episode. We answered 4 questions. I would like to thank the people who asked the questions in the first place. And I would like to thank everybody who listened to this episode. This was another episode from Perfect English Podcast. I'm going to make an episode like this every week. I have a backlog of some questions, so I have a couple of weeks ahead, but I'm always waiting for more questions from you. And so I would like to thank everybody who sends questions. So this is Danny, your host, saying thank you very much for listening to another episode from Perfect English Podcast. Remember to send me your questions and I will include them in the next possible episode from Listener's Choice Perfect English Podcast. Thank you very much.